Good morning, Mrs. Hogan's third period class. I'm Chris LaValle with your local news. Woo! Is it hot in here? And here's my partner, Ryan McDonald.
Oh, Chris, you alright?
Oh, alright.
Alright, well here's Ahmad Jackson with archaeology.
Thanks, Ryan. We're here in the Valley of the Kings, somewhere in Egypt, where kings and queens were mummified and buried. This says about the society and social organization. They believed in hierarchy, and kings were at the top of the social class, and that kings were sent to an afterlife, which shows they obviously believed in the afterlife. They believed kings and queens were sent to the afterlife, so they were also buried with valuable things like jewelry, cloth, and other cool things. The ancient Egyptians were polytheistic. They believed in many gods. They also believed that the pharaoh was a god, which means that they were under a theocracy, which means the religious leader and the government leader were the same person. The ancient Egyptians used hieroglyphics or pictographs, and they wrote that on papyrus to communicate with others. A pictograph is a pictorial symbol for a word or a phrase. People have decoded these ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, which has taught modern people how their culture was. Pictographs and hieroglyphs were also used by other ancient civilizations such as Mesopotamians, Harappans, and Indians, which were in the Indus River Valley civilization. Send you guys back to the studio. The weather in Egypt today is going to be cloudy, it looks like on the phone. It's going to be sunny tomorrow. Well, here's my partner, Kyle.
Here's Chris LaValle with art and architecture.
Thanks again, Ryan. As you can see, we're on a bridge along the longest river in the world. It is 4,037 miles long. Yeah. It is known as the Nile River. The civilization of ancient Egypt was indebted to the Nile River and its dependable seasonal floods. The rivers, predictable and the fertile soil, provided the Egyptians the basis of great agricultural wealth. The Egyptians had a great irrigation system. Historians credit the ancient Egyptians with teaching of humankind how to build. The pyramids that they built are religious because it represents the afterlife. Until the rise of Egyptian civilization, people lived in makeshift structures made from whatever materials were locally available. Egypt was a rich country, and many people were engaged in creating luxuries for the wealthy. Goldsmiths produced beautiful jewelry. Sculptors carved stone and ivory into exquisite figurines and vessels. They also made ointments, lotions, and perfumes, and craftsmen shaped delicate structures to contain them. Egyptians were one of the first groups of people to practice agriculture. Pharaohs also built a profusion of celestial temples dedicated to favorite gods to memorize them. The Egyptians had a calendar that was 365 days long. It was very similar to ours. It was divided into 12 months and 30 days, just like ours. But the months were divided into 10 days with 3 weeks each. Permanent construction kept people in one place over a long period of time. As the structure began in the reign of a king and the culture during the reign of one or more of his successors. In many cases, by the time the structure was completed a century or more after it was begun, it was time to begin expanding. So construction was an ongoing activity. The most famous agricultural wonders of ancient Egypt were called pyramids. Many of them were located in the Giza Plateau and guarded by the Sphinx. The The ancient Egyptians relied on a complex system of locks to control and distribute the water. They built dams and right angles to the water's flow, forcing the water into large basins. The river some people these days. The river 1,400 acres of rain. These basins were made out of clay and let the water seeping into the ground. The water in the basins were then made into a system of dikes and canals. That is all. Thank you.
And here's a look at sports. Go Cubes! And here's Ryan with geography.
As you can see here on the banks of the Nile River, there has been a recent flood which caused the soil to be very fertile and moist for great farming. There's a quote that geography is the mother of all history. Geographic features such as the Nile River and the eastern and western deserts influenced the agriculture in ancient Egypt. The Nile makes it very easy for farming as it creates fertile land, but the desert make it confined to a certain area because it doesn't have good farming. The Nile River Valley is mostly located right along the Nile River in between the eastern and western deserts, and starting at the Nile River Delta in the north. Many African countries are now the place of what used to be the Nile River Valley, including Sudan, South Sudan, Brunei, Rwanda, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Tanzania, Kenya, Ethiopia, Uganda, and Egypt. Geographic setting had a pretty big effect on the Nile River Valley. The civilization depended on the Nile River for mostly everything. To get food, for irrigation systems, and cities would easily develop and prosper along the river. Ancient Egypt could have been isolated from other civilizations. The deserts on both sides of civilization acted as a natural barrier from outsiders or enemies, because it was probably very hard for people to cross through them. The only part of the civilization that was exposed to a large body of water was the northern part around the Nile Delta. The Mediterranean Sea flowed through the Nile Delta and into the Nile River. The cities that were right along near the Mediterranean Sea were major parts of trading. And as you can see, ancient Egypt, the geography had a very big effect on ancient Egypt.
Yo, homie, now make it rain, Cal, with that economics.
The inner structure of the ancient Egyptian statue is based on three factors: economy, religion, and political ideology. These factors were closely connected in a variety of modes and expressions. One major difference from our modern economy system was the lack of coinage and true money to store and transport throughout the pharaonic period. The Egyptians used 4 units of measurement to price and trade commodities: the devon, the senou, the hen, and the car. Acquiring and disposing of goods was done by bartering on a price. Although there were no fixed prices, ancient Egyptians were fairly consistent in determining how much an item was worth. Evidence of loans has been recorded in the Egyptian sources. 2 types of loans existed. One was made of a fixed date for repayment and a penalty if that day was missed. The second type was not based on a fixed date for repayment, but rather on an obligation for reciprocity between the lender and the debtor. The land benefiting the redistribution system was an important component of the ancient Egyptian economy. Under the system, the soil of Egypt was the exclusive property of the king, who could concede it to the temple authorities, state officials, or the populace, according to the king. Priests and high dignitaries were granted use of the land, but the king retained direct ownership. The temple or political offices abducted the soil production and commodities to the populace according to the individual's needs. Surplus together with the local food and homemade items could be traded at local markets. The system of benefits and land bestowment on institutions and individuals brought to the state a great income in the form of tates, which might have included a share in the produce of the lands, cattle, and other products, human labor, and wealth. One characteristic aspect of the trade economy in ancient Egypt was the gift exchange. It existed in 2 forms: as gifts between the king and his populace, and as diplomatic tributes from allies and foreign parties to the pharaoh and the Egyptian state, especially during the Middle Kingdom and the New Kingdom.
I'm the illest person rhyming this. Now let's go to Ryan McDonald, the political scientist.
Ancient Egypt was run by a pharaoh, or a god king. At the beginning of the New Kingdom, there was a different ruler for Upper and Lower Egypt, but then they were united by Narmer. There were multiple dynasties that ruled ancient Egypt over time, but they all ran about the same type of government. The basis for power is a theocracy. A priest-king pharaoh is the leader of ancient Egypt. It was divided up into 42 different nomes, or administrative powers, each governed by a nomarch or a type of government. The pharaoh set up government central offices, including foreign affairs, military affairs, treasury and tax offices, departments of public works, granaries, armories, mortuary cults of deceased pharaohs, and regulators of temple priesthood. The Old Kingdom was the earliest period of supremacy, and it emerged around 2600 BC. Ancient Egypt was said to be at its peak during the New Kingdom. More specifically, when Ramses II, also known as Ramses the Great, around 1280 BC. The ancient Egyptian civilization was around for about 2,500 years, longer than most other civilizations back at that time. Ancient Egypt fell during the year 30 BC when Cleopatra VII committed suicide, which put an end to the traditional Egyptian government as the nation became a territory of Rome. The rulership that they had was a theocracy. Ancient Egypt was run by a religious/political leader called a pharaoh. He or she was responsible for enforcing land laws, delivering justice, and maintaining law and order, a concept that the ancient Egyptians referred to as mat. They were organized into nomes or provinces called sepat. There were 20 nomes in Lower Egypt and 22 nomes in Upper Egypt. Each was ruled by a heretopia called the Great Overlord or Nomarch. There were actually no official legal codes for ancient Egypt, but court documents show that Egyptian law was based on a common sense view of right and wrong that emphasized reaching agreements and resolving conflicts other than strictly adhering to a complicated set of laws. There was a local council of elders known as Kenbet in the New Kingdom that were responsible for ruling in court cases involving small claims and minor disputes. More serious cases involving murder, major land transactions, and tomb robbery were referred to the Great Kenbet. Ancient Egypt's first rose with the political unification of Upper and Lower Egypt under the first pharaoh. It fell after being conquered by a succession of foreign powers, ancient Rome being the last and most powerful that finished them off. The ancient Egyptian civilization did not conquer any other major empires or civilizations. The Egyptians were finally conquered by the ancient Romans, and they became a territory of Rome. They were only conquered once by the Romans. And finally, I don't think because their geographic location had an effect on their conquering, because their location was actually very helpful. It's just that the Romans were too powerful. Thank you.